Welcome to another episode of Breaking into Cybersecurity. Today we have Robert who will be joining us. He'll be sharing his journey into cybersecurity. Robert, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this industry?
Sure. My company is protectnowllc.com. I've been speaking and training organizations for over 30 years on risk reduction. Security awareness training is the basic generic term for what it is that I do, although that's not essentially what I do, but we can get into that later. My entry into cyber is probably a little bit different than most. It actually started with me being 12 years old in downtown Boston getting beat up by 5 kids. Yeah, literally. Yes, that happened. And then from that point on, when I went home all beaten and bloodied, I asked my dad, like, "What went wrong here? Why did this happen to me? Like, what can I do to prevent that from happening?" And he sat me down and explained to me that, in the world that we live in, there are predators and there are their prey. And I, at that time, was the antelope, and the boys who beat me up were the lion. And so I, learned firsthand sociopaths, psychopaths, hardcore narcissists, bad actors, and then, being the victim. And then from that point on, my focus became security. Like it was an important, significant, traumatic event that occurred in my life, and so my view of the world was a little bit different than the kids around me. And then shortly after that, kind of going off script a little bit, I met a young girl when I was 13 that was sexually assaulted. And that right there just kind of like solidified my focus. Like what happened to her, I did not know was even a possibility at the time. We're
Mhm,
talking 40 plus years ago, and kids didn't know what sex was at that
mhm,
time, never mind forcible rape. And so going forward, I just started to consume everything that I could in regards to personal protection.
mhm,
And by the mid 90s, I had my first computer in 1995, and it was an IBM PS1 Consultant. That was the manufacturer and the brand with a Windows 3.0 operating system and 150 megabyte hard drive, right?
Oh, that
Back
was
in,
huge.
yeah, back in, yeah. And so within about a month, maybe 2 months of plugging into my AOL dial-up modem, I got hacked. When I say
Mm,
hacked, it was essentially about $3,000 in credit card fraud. And back
mm,
then, that was a big deal. It was
mhm,
a big deal to me because I was this small startup that went from a mail order catalog business to having this online presence and having merchant status, which wasn't an easy thing to do. Getting merchant status meant back then a small business piggybacking on somebody else's merchant status. And so when that happened to me, when I experienced that level of fraud, I was obviously upset, but astonished at the ease of how they did it.
mhm,
And security from that point on became a lot more than physical security for me because that was my business. My business was physical security, protecting women from harm, protecting all of us from predators. But then now it became thieves and virtual thieves. And so my focus evolved pretty quickly. And identity theft came up on my radar like right after that because it was a problem now with the internet. Social security numbers and data breaches started to become an issue in the mid to late 90s, which we didn't really hear much about data breaches until the early 2000s. It became an issue, primarily social security numbers being used to open up new lines of credit. And so now my focus was both physical security and virtual security. Being a victim in two instances, it broadened my awareness of what was going on in the world, and so I started to write and speak and do TV and radio. And back in the day, like that was a big deal. So yeah, that's essentially how I got into it.
Wow. And as you learn from both the fraud that happened to you and the ease of which that happened, where did that lead to from a career standpoint of what you did and how you evolved your career?
Yeah, I am unlike most in my industry in that most are much more, I guess, technically adapt than I am. I certainly know how to my way around a WordPress website and making changes and optimizing it for SEO and engaging, Google Analytics and Google Search Console. I'm good enough at that, right? But when it comes to, basic coding, I need Gemini to walk me through setup and so forth. I don't have the credentials like most of your viewers and listeners, but
Don't feel bad. I'm the same way.
I am actually intrigued by the CIOs and CTOs and CISOs of the world, and, they're the good guy hackers. They're the ones that I champion and I talk about, and I try to make their lives a little bit easier due to the fact that the people that they're responsible for, to some degree, or they're trying to protect, their employees, their coworkers, their colleagues, for them, it's like herding cats, right?
Mhm.
And so I understand what they're up against, and that's what I speak to. And when I started to understand cyber fraud back in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, they became my focus, making their jobs a little bit easier, providing the security awareness training that they needed for their people became my focus. So I started to speak to them and the challenges that they were facing. And so while I was speaking to personal protection as it relates to violence prevention and identity theft protection as it relates to protecting your social security numbers and your credit card numbers, I started to see and understand how the C suite CIOs and CTOs and such needed what I had to provide to get their employees up to speed in regards to what not to click, what to do when you get a phone call, how to respond when you get an email, and started to design my curriculum around their wants and their needs.
Mhm.
That's primarily how I got into providing the security awareness training that I'm doing today, was to provide the basic, 101 for the C-suite tech entrepreneurs and so forth.
Oh, okay. So you're y you provide that real one-to-one, "Hey, I've been in your shoes" situation. I've clicked on that link. Let me share that story with you so that you don't repeat it versus the boring old training that they might otherwise have and make it more actionable for them so that it's that straight talk versus the technical jargon, right?
You certainly summed it up. I mean, that's really so that's what that the problem that they faced back in the early 2000s hasn't changed, meaning that the CTO, the CIO, and so forth, like they've been engaged in various forms of security awareness training over the past, say, 25, 30 years. That training has evolved quite a bit. Phishing simulation training didn't really exist back then. It wasn't even a thing. It didn't
Mhm,
that wasn't even a product or a service that was offered until late 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. In that
mhm,
time frame, that's when Fish Me, which is no longer, I don't think, they might have sold, came into play. They were like one of the originals. I think they since sold off. And then, others came into play. Noble4 wasn't around until, they partnered with Kevin Mitnick back in, it might have been 10 years ago. And phishing simulation training has become the de facto compliance based, check the box form of training that has been around now for, let's say, 15 years, right?
mhm.
And that didn't exist. And that is what is being used today. And even still, from my perspective in the work that I do, the phone calls that I'm getting, the conversations that I'm having with those CTOs and CIOs is that while that's necessary and it provides us the metrics to see who's clicking what and where our organization is at, and where it provides the compliance based, again, check the box in case, there is a data breach, in case the state or the feds come in and say, hey, you were breached, show us what you've done, to, make sure that that didn't happen. They need a level of boots on the ground, engage with my people, get them to care about security. Phishing simulation doesn't really engage the human the way that it needs to in order
Mhm.
to move the needle to get the everyday human to care about security. The thing about security is that, and this is what I've learned over 35, 40 years, is that human beings are a bit adverse to security. We don't necessarily want security. And what that means is, but our baseline as an interdependent species is what we are, means
Mhm.
that we depend on each other for our survival. And when you are an interdependent species, your baseline is trust. We
Mhm.
trust by default. Trusting by default is what we do. And what that also means is we don't naturally not trust others. Not trusting others doesn't come natural to us. We want to and need to give the benefit of the doubt. We want to and need to trust others for our survival. So not trusting others is one of those things that it doesn't come easy to us. So when the
Mhm.
phone rings, when an email comes in, you get phished. When you get a text message, your first reaction is, I want to believe this. I need to believe this. Like, I'm a human. I need to essentially trust what's coming at me here. And which is what makes phishing simulation like not the best way to fundamentally get a human to believe and agree with and want security in their life. It just solves phishing simulation training solves that one issue revolving around security and security awareness, phishing,
Mhm. Mhm.
but it doesn't necessarily transform the human's behavior when it comes to security and what security is and what security isn't, and get
Mhm.
them to the point where they actually are drinking the Kool-Aid of phishing simulation training. Most employees don't necessarily think or believe that bad things will ever happen to them. Most employees don't lock their doors to their home. Most of them don't have home security systems. Most of them don't have a password manager or engage in two-factor authentication. Like, they don't do these basic things. They don't engage in identity theft protection or something called a credit freeze. And these are all things that affect the person. And so my philosophy has always been, since the very beginning and into today, that
Mhm.
all security is personal. And it really is.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Like I've always said, like, when coaching others, you have to find a way to either make it relate to their job duties or make it relate to their home life. Otherwise, they're not going to assimilate with the content and see the value in what you're trying to teach them. And if they can see the value in how it can help them at home, then they'll take it, assimilate it, and then say, "Oh, if it can help me at home, it can help me at work." So, like a password manager, like you mentioned, um, saving all your passwords for home, then it makes sense for work too. But if you give them a password manager at work and allow them to have their own personal version, and then you allow that to become a natural part of their life, then you're more likely to adopt that behavior holistically as part of their life versus just doing it at work.
100%. So, what I see in the field that I'm in, working with all the CIOs and CTOs, et cetera, is that if that human does not truly believe in security, then I don't know that cybersecurity is the right profession for them. Meaning that I don't know that they can effectively do their job in cybersecurity if at home, if in their personal life, they don't truly believe in security. Let me give you a few examples of what that might mean. Like, I spoke in front of, not too long ago, I spoke in front of like 200 CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs, right? Big room of like all security professionals, all tech people, right?
Mm.
Mostly men, but there was about 10% women there. And I told them, I said, this is a true thing. I am a guy that has 22 security cameras, maybe a little excessive, but it's true. And so if you hear like this guy's got 22 security cameras, well, what might be your a viewpoint of my disposition, my worldview, my outlook, like how I navigate each day? Like if the guy's got 22 security cameras, he must be what? And I asked that question, right? What do you think their answer was?
Paranoid?
Exactly. I I had 200 men and women go paranoid like, out loud. It was kind of funny, right? Because it was like this loud roar, and they all looked at each other, kind of funny. And the reality of it is, when we as humans look at security as a form of paranoia, if you truly understand what paranoia actually is, right, which is a mental health disorder, that a person who has paranoia is by definition out of control. If you truly understand what paranoia is, then you recognize that like I don't want that in my life. I don't
Mhm,
want paranoia. Paranoia
mhm,
is upsetting. It's awful. It's out of control. Like you really truly believe that people are out to get you. Like you're living in fear all the time. And if you think that that's what security is, which is risk management, it's putting systems in place, it's adopting various tools and strategies. It's about gaining and getting a bit of control over your environment. But if you think security is about paranoia, you don't want that in your life. But
uh,
that's where we're
yeah.
at.
So 22 cameras depends on their use cases, right? If it's, oh, well, I have a camera that's, say, watching my flowers or my garden while I'm gone and monitoring the automation to make sure that they don't dry up, that's a use case, but someone doesn't know that that 1 or 2 cameras that are being used for that, like, they just think camera security, external monitoring, like, they don't think of, well, what's the use case for? Think in my house, I have at least 6 cameras. I probably want more. I mean,
It's awesome.
I I exactly. I love automation.
Yeah.
I love the data that it collects. And when I advise individuals, it's like, what risk are you looking to mitigate? And then what risks are you looking to accept?
Yeah. You don't
If
want
you're
dead flowers.
exactly. If you want your if you wanna look at your garden and make sure that the deer aren't stomping on it at night, or to figure out what's trampling at your garden at night, you put up a camera and you monitor it. Like, that doesn't mean, like, you're paranoid, but there's a use case. You're looking to reduce the risk of something destroying your garden. You put time and effort and valuable resources towards that, and you're looking to protect it.
And the point of all that is the fact that like the dichotomy of security is about paranoia versus security is about risk management is that we don't want to engage in paranoia. We don't want to engage in security because it makes us fear and worry and it's
Mhm,
uncomfortable. And nobody wants to live like that. Nobody
mhm.
wants to think that others are out to get them. When I ask that same audience, like, how many of you actually have a home security system? If I get 10 to 15% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, which means like 80 to 90% of the room does not have a home security system. And then I say, well, why don't you have a home security system? And you know what they say? I don't want to live like that. Like, live like what? Well, I don't want to have to worry. I don't want to have to live in fear. I just want to be free. And I'm like, really? That's how you look at security, at risk management? And these are security professionals.
Yeah.
So if you don't truly believe in security, like I don't worry that my house is going to get broken into. I don't worry that someone's going to is out to get me. I have a home security system for the same reason why I wear a seatbelt
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it makes sense to me. It's smart. It's the right thing to do. It gives me control. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I have a leak detection system, not that I'm worried that I'm gonna have a leak, but if there was a leak, I want to know when it happens so that I can react to it and mitigate it real quick.
That's
I
it.
want to have a smoke detection system so I can react to it and detect it. I don't want to live in fear of it, but it's there to protect you. But you're right. So when you're working with these individuals, or maybe let's pivot it this way, how can we motivate the next generation of individuals that might be interested in this field to see this field as interesting and not as living in paranoia, and be interested in joining, and for example, like yourself, seeing that you don't have to be technical, that you can be an individual that can look at the situation, be able to assess the risk, have that conversation with the executive staff, with the cybersecurity staff, and be able to bridge the two together and be able to translate, this is the technical risk, this is the executive risk management strategy, and let's combine the two together to create a good strategy for the organization.
I think it boils down to, and this might just sound so rudimentary. It boils down to just being a good, conscious, aware, balanced human, right? So hear me out, right? So the way I look at security, if you've ever like studied like basic psychology and physiology, Abraham Maslow is this guy like he created this hierarchy of human needs. And at the base of the triangle of the hierarchy of human needs, and anybody can Google it, is your physiological needs. Your physiological needs, of course, are, consuming, it's getting a good night, it's getting sleep, it's getting, it's consuming, nourishment, food, it's hydrating, your physiological needs, right? You need that as your baseline for survival. No food, no water, no sleep, you're dead. Right above your physiological needs are your safety, security, stability, and structure needs. You need to have a basis of security and structure in order to, you have to have a roof over your head. You have to have, a place to sleep, a place to function, right? You need safety, security, stability, structure, and protection, right? Above that, now you get into like your love and belongingness needs, and then eventually something called self actualization. Security is one of those things like you need it as much as you need to drink fluids, as much as you need to sleep and eat. And so when you look at security as this holistic thing, as what you mentioned, it's a part of my development. It's a part of my functioning, as a human in society. And you look at it holistically in that regard, the same way like you look at maintaining your physical health and your mental health. Like you can't be consuming angry, negative, awful things all day long because we become what we think about. And if you're always consuming angry, negative, awful things all day long, you're going to be an angry, negative, awful person. But if you're consuming like happy stuff, good movies, good books, good audio, it provides you perspective and balance and a happy, positive outlook versus, negative, miserable, angry, then you're going to be a better, more conscious, empathetic person, right? I mean, all of that kind of comes with personal balance, right? And security is a big part of that. And if you look at cybersecurity, the same way you look at personal development, personal security, then I think you're going to be much more effective in your job because you'll have a better understanding of communicating with people effectively. When you look at security holistically, right, and with that big picture, when you're selling security to your colleagues, coworkers, employees, you're looking at security as the person as a whole. They have their fears, they have their worries, they have their concerns. And when you're addressing security in from that perspective, which is the perspective that they have, security is about paranoia. It's about worry and fear. I don't want that. And you understand that their baseline, most people's baseline, is that they don't want to think or believe that bad things can happen to them ever. Most people, to a significant degree, function in denial that these things will ever happen to them. And when you function in denial that this isn't going to happen to me, then I have no need to deal with this because that's not my responsibility. That's the CISO's job. That's the cybersecurity professional's job in my company. He's paranoid. It's not my job. It's his job. It's her job. But when you understand that that's how they're looking at it and you address them from that perspective, that like you're there to kind of provide them a level of security appreciation, which is essentially what I teach. While security awareness is something that I do, what I teach is security appreciation. But that's going from intellectually, my awareness is I understand all these risks. Whereas security appreciation means I understand these risks and it means something to me. It matters to me. Therefore, I want to do something about it because all security is personal. It begins with me first. And I want to make sure that I am protected because we are a selfish or self interested creature by default, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And that I also want to make sure that my loved ones are properly protected. Therefore, I'm going to put all these systems in place to protect myself at home first because it means something and it matters to me. And then from there, I can do my job that much more effectively when it comes to the emails I get, the phone calls I receive, the texts that I get on the job, and so forth. And if I understand how to do this stuff in my personal life first, because I appreciate security and what it does for me and my family, then I'm much more effective on the job. And as somebody who's breaking into the business, if you look at security like that, when it comes down to you engaging in the process of getting hired and you speak like this, they're going to be doing a double take. Like this person like gets it. They understand. Like they recognize risk because it means something and it matters to them. It's not just coding. It's not just installing software. It's not just responding to alerts. It's holistically security means something and matters to you.
So, one last question for you. You mentioned that you're a girl dad. How do you communicate this to kids that are just getting their first device? They're wanting to go on social media. They're communicating with strangers. How do you communicate this to them?
I love that you asked me that question. Thank you. I have been speaking like this, the way I'm talking to you, to my audiences, to my kids since they were like 5 years old. And because none of this requires any technical ability, it's just human 101 communications. And I've always understood that I think the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to the quality of their effective communication skills. If you can effectively communicate an idea to others, then I think that you kind of get what you want, so to speak, and you kind of get them to do what you want, so to speak. And that requires, a little bit of influence, a little bit of ethical manipulation and so forth. And so when you're speaking to your audience, when you're speaking to your employees, when you're speaking to your coworkers, if you communicate with them the same way that you speak to your children. And when I say that, I'm not saying like you talk to them like they're babies. You talk to them like they're humans that understand and want to learn. Then I think you have a much more effective way of getting across your point across. And so I've been having these conversations with my girls early on. And when it came to like them saying to me when they were 9, 10, 11 years old, Daddy, I want an iPhone. Daddy, I want to be on social media. Daddy, I want to, be on Snapchat. I'm like, okay, so let's talk about that. Let's have a conversation about it. So right now you're getting A's across the board in school, right? And let's talk about like the kids that you go to school with and like what kind of grades they're getting. And so what I've found in the course of being a dad and being, technically savvy and in the business of cybersecurity and in understanding social media and online reputation management and how these devices are truly addictive and all the apps are truly addictive on purpose. I have seen over and over and over and over again families struggle when they give their 9-year old, 10-year old, 11-year old a digital device with unfettered access to everything. And the mom would reach back to me and say, Hey, I've got an iPad for my 10-year old. What software do I install to monitor what they're doing? My response is, why does your 10-year-old have an iPad? Like they have unfettered access to the internet. Like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't they kicking a ball? Why aren't they playing outside? Why aren't they, engaged in other social activities that aren't just this all day long. We've become accustomed in our culture and our society to use the digital devices as babysitters. And that's not working. And I've seen families over and over and over again struggle with bullying and just kids' mental health is suffering. And so the conversation I'm having with my kids is pointing all of this out to them and how their peers are struggling with their grades and their development and their ability to be social. Like I've had parents say to me over and over and over again, "Your kids are amazing. When you talk to them, they look you in the eye. They actually respond to your questions. They actually have a conversation with you." And I say to them, "Well, what makes that amazing?" They're like, "Because no other kids are doing that." I'm like, "That's what you're supposed to do. That's what we did growing up. That's just normal." The other kids that aren't doing that is because parents don't understand that the child is being raised by a digital device and you're not interacting with them like we are right now. And that's what it takes to get people to care about everything. You talk to them, you engage them, and of course, security. And so I had all these conversations with my girls early on, and I said, "You can get a digital device if you really truly want one. But these are the repercussions. It's going to affect your grades. It's going to affect your development. It's going to affect your ability to like be a straight A student. Or if you want, if you can wait, I'll get you one when you turn 14, which was still too young, but we'll do it then." And they made the choice. They made the decision and they got them at 14, which was still too young, which is when all the drama started. Once they got the digital devices at 14, that's when it all started. But prior to that, it solidified their development. And they didn't have the same we didn't have the same emotional drama in our household as pretty much all of the other households that we were engaged with where they gave their kids devices early.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, Robert, thank you so much for sharing your journey and sharing your story and joining us on breaking into cybersecurity.
Hey man, thank you so much.
Absolutely.